Welcome to Was It Good, the podcast that talks about movies and TV shows. Today we are talking about X-Men 97. I'm Arjuna, joined by my two brothers,
Krishna
and Ravi.
and we are Was It Good? Oh, you guys really left me hanging there.
Yeah, we know. I knew you were gonna do it.
So you just let him do it by himself? That's
Yeah.
really mean.
As I mentioned at the top, we are talking about Disney Plus's X-Men 97, the animated sequel series to X-Men the Animated Series. And guys, before we get into our usual one-word impressions and go through the series, go through the finale as a whole, I just want to start by talking about our experience with this show and how you guys came to kind of watch X-Men 97. So a little background for our listeners and our audience out there. Krishna, Ravi, and I, when we were children in the 90s, we were little lads who watched television. We liked to watch Power Rangers, and we also liked to watch X-Men the Animated Series. It was a show that we put on. It was part of our Saturday morning cartoons. It was a great show. It was a lot of fun, and yeah, I'm curious to hear I'll start with you, Ravi. I'm curious to hear what your memories of X-Men the Animated Series are and what they kind of were before you came into this show as you remembered it from the 90s.
So this is going to be a controversial take, but it was always, in terms of like the Marvel animated shows, it was always Spider-Man was number one, and then it was X-Men. Like X-Men was always in my brain like the secondary show, as opposed to Spider-Man being like the main show that I look forward to on Saturday mornings. That's not to say like I didn't enjoy X-Men, but it's when they announced X-Men 97, I was sitting there and I was like, oh yeah, the X-Men show, and I was like, oh cool, it's on Disney Plus. Let me take a quick look, and like I was jumping through various like arcs and things, like I don't remember any of this shit. Like I remember watching like some of the big moments with like the Sentinels, Master Mold, that type of stuff. But like a lot of the Sinister stuff, like I don't remember because I didn't rewatch it as much as like I rewatched like the Spider-Man animated show. Like I remember a lot of that show because I would rewatch those arcs over and over and over again. This one, not so much. That being said, like going in and seeing these characters and seeing the story continue, I think is super, super cool. The fact that like it maintained its like animation style quirkiness, and then also like improving upon that, and then also like how they told those stories, improving on that, I think is a great way to like update it and bring it into the current generation of viewers, if you will.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I guess for me, I just want to add on to Ravi's ranking. I don't remember I don't know if you guys remember, that was an Iron Man animated show as well back in the 90s.
I hated that
right?
show.
Yeah, that was a distant third. So I completely agree with Ravi's rankings. I just want to give a shout out to Iron Man, and the only reason to bring that up is that we got a lot of cameos from that connected animated universe, and Spider-Man was cool because Spider-Man back in the 90s was always the character that seemed to go on the adventures with all the different groups and the different heroes. Teamed up with Daredevil, teamed up with X-Men, teamed up with Wolverine by himself a couple of times.
Fantastic
Four, yeah. So, one of the best moments of the season, real quick, was the last episode. We're seeing a Peter Parker in the same getup, the same hairstyle from the 90s with Mary Jane, Flash Thompson right in the background. That was
I didn't catch
really
Flash.
cool moment. Yeah, Flash in the background, like he's like eating something, and he's just like looking like a bully. So that was like really cool. So like Ravi said, very much feel the same way. Spider-Man was the GOAT of pretty much superhero animation. I honestly, it still is in a way. I think whenever we tune into animated superhero stuff, which isn't very often, but when we do, Spider-Man, the 90s anime show, is the gold standard.
Put some respect on Batman.
Great stories.
Series.
I was
we're
never
talking
I
just
never
Marvel,
really
not
got I
DC.
never really got into Batman the animated series.
What?
I never really watched it. It wasn't my jam. Yeah, I was more. I tuned in a little bit to Batman Beyond, but Batman animated series. I was always a Marvel tyke. I didn't
Stan.
care much for DC. Yeah,
Okay.
I didn't like the DC stories that much. But
Real quick, sorry to be the interrupting one, but on the Peter Parker Mary Jane scene, you know that wraps up how that animated show for Spider-Man ends, right? So that's the Mary
Yes.
Jane that he goes with Madam Web to search for. The creator, I think, of X-Men or whoever said that is his Mary Jane. 'Cause remember at the very end, there was a whole
Right.
clone thing, and he
yeah. He got her
searching,
back.
but he found her finally. Yeah.
I
Right,
sort of
they
assumed
never-
that this might be taking place before that arc or something. So that's good to know.
No, they never got to actually wrap up the final arc. The final season that they wanted to do was Peter kind of going through different dimensions looking for his Mary Jane, as the showrunner confirmed. But yeah, the showrunner, like Ravi said, did an interview and confirmed that is Miss Peter's Mary Jane. We're gonna actually. There's a bunch of cameos, like you both have mentioned, at the in this finale that we're gonna get to at some point. But real quick, before we get into one-word impressions, we've obviously given our background on X-Men 97. But what was your, it seems like both of you were a little bit lukewarm on this series, right? Like the series was fun, but it wasn't necessarily a favorite for both of you when you were kids. I would also say Spider-Man was my favorite as well when I was a kid. I kind of actually forgot about it when I was mentioning shows at the top because I forgot. But I would say that my expectations weren't super high going in, but when I saw the first trailer, I was pretty excited. What were your expectations for both of you going in? Were you really excited for when the show was announced? Were you both a little bit indifferent? Were you both kind of done? In terms of like 2024, it's a much different landscape with Marvel Entertainment than it was in the 90s. So were you both kind of just like, oh, I'm a little fatigued with just Marvel content in general? Krishna, I'll start with you. What were your feelings?
Going in, definitely, I think lukewarm and indifferent are perfect adjectives for how I was feeling about the show. In fact, I wasn't even sure if I was going to tune in, but Arjuna just sort of kept hyping it up. And then a certain episode happened while I was visiting Los Angeles, and episode 5, yeah. And Arjuna was basically, we were hanging out. And after we were hanging out, Arjuna was like, you need to go home and you need to watch this episode right now. And we did. And without even watching the first 4 episodes, watch episode 5. I was a little tipsy, I will admit. But that episode slapped harder than most entertainment things in general, animated or not. That episode, it felt like a slap across the face in the best way, really, in a good way. And after that, I was like, okay, I get it. Yeah, I'm thinking I'm back into X-Men. So
yeah, the episode
into X-Men.
Episode 5 is called "Remember It." It's quoting the line that Gambit says at the end of the episode, and I guess I should preface this by saying, if you haven't watched X-Men 97 Season 1, we are going to be spoiling the show majorly. Here's a major spoiler. At the end of Episode 5, Gambit dies.
yeah,
He gets impaled by a Sentinel, and as he's impaled, he says, "The name's Gambit, remember it," and then he epically blows up the Sentinel. And
Not
that
just any
episode,
Sentinel. He blows up a Master Mold Sentinel.
yeah, which is pretty sick, pretty
Big one.
awesome. And I think for me at that point, that's when I knew this show was going to be different than what X-Men, the animated series, was. I think we had gotten glimpses of it in the first 4 episodes, that this was not necessarily going to follow the same censors that a Saturday morning cartoon does, but to kill a major character in such a way. And seemingly at that point, we also thought Magneto was dead. A bunch of other characters also died on this island that were kind of periphery characters, but also still very important. This show elevated to a new level. Ravi, what about you? What were your expectations for the show going in as the show started a few months ago?
Well, they dropped the first static still images of the character designs, I believe, at Comic-Con 22. like back in 22 or maybe 2023. And like I remember seeing those being like, this looks like garbage and not what I remember from my childhood. And I was very like, cool, whatever. If it's good, I'll binge it at the end. If not, whatever. And I think, again, because Juna hyped it up, I was like, all right, fine, what is this thing? I think I let 3 episodes go, 3 or 4, and then I watched them and I was like, oh, okay, I get it now. Like, this is a very interesting and entertaining show. It's a little jarring from like the voice actor perspective, because like some of the cast who were the original voice actors have sadly, passed away. Like the show was 30 plus years ago, like in 92 is when it started. So quite a few of them were like, within the 30, 40s back then. And, the ones that are still alive today, like their voices have obviously changed as well, gone older. So it was a little kind of like jarring to like hear some new voices, older voices of what you're familiar with. So that kind of took me out in like first episode or so, and then like by the second I was like, okay, I get it. Like it flows really well. It makes sense. It's good. I like the fact that like they continue upon the, they continue the mutant story, right? Mutants are hated by humans. Humans don't like mutants, want mutants to like work for them, cause things that like humans like hate them, and then cause things that then the mutants have to save. And it's like this weird repeating cycle. And that's a very big theme in the original. And like also the original series also did a lot of like killing off characters as well, similar to like what, not as like to the epic proportions that we saw with Gambit, but like they did kill characters quite a bit in the original. Like Jean Grey died a bunch. Like there's that part at the end where Rogue's like, what X-Men is going to die next? Jean's already died. Like, shit like that. Like the time travel
been
stuff.
there,
so it's like it feels familiar, but it feels different, which makes it, I think, a very unique show.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point about the voice acting. My one maybe like minor criticism for the show is I kind of wish, with all respect to the original voice actors, that they just had a clean slate of new voice actors for the show, because I think Storm and Rogue's voices in particular, to my ear, sound quite old in comparison to the rest of the characters, particularly Storm, where it does take me out of some of the scenes and some of the impact that I feel like it should have, and Rogue in particular, where it doesn't, the voice doesn't match the character that we're necessarily getting. Well, I felt like the new voice actors for Cyclops and Jean worked, and I think like Xavier and Magneto worked really well as well. I'm not sure if those were original or not. Even like I think Hank Beast might have been the same voice actor, but he is an older character in general anyway. So to me, that still kind of worked, and he has this weird quippy kind of like observations and one-liners and puns that he kind of throws out there, which I did find still very entertaining as a whole. But let's get to our one-word impressions for the show, and how we've talked about our history with it kind of going in, but I want to hear, now that we're talking about the show as a whole, the finale in particular as well, what is the one word you would use to describe the show? Krishna, let's start with you.
Mine is going to be. It can only be one word. If we were allowed 2 words, it would be theme song. But we're only allowed 1 word, so it's just going to be intro. I never watched the intros, the theme songs, the opening credits, the theme song, right, to shows. I watched the theme song to this every single episode. It was the song, first of all, is just so good. And even if you haven't watched the show in 30 years, for a lot of millennials who watched that show, if you heard that theme song, you'd know immediately what it was. You would be transported back to Saturday mornings in the 90s watching X-Men. And I like that it was updated, so it sounded even like cooler in a way. And then kind of like Ravi said, going in, like the animation, he wasn't sure about it, but I actually really liked the animation once I started watching the show. And that the intro, it felt like a nice combination of retro and updated, if that makes sense. It's hard to explain. They did retro animation in a very modern, cool way. So I dug the whole intro. It set me up, got me in the right mindset to go in to watch every episode, and it was perfect.
Yeah, I loved how each episode it was slightly different too, right? There was characters coming in and out. They had different scenes from like the original series and different comic book arcs in there as well. So that was really cool. That it was a reward for those who didn't skip the intro, like you, Krishna, where you could kind of notice these subtle changes and even like I think it's episode 2 or 3 when Magneto's in the opening.
Yeah,
like that got me really, really excited. Just to see like, oh my God, Magneto is part of the X-Men and he's in his like, his M costume and everything. And then you get sad when he's out of it, when Gambit's out of it because he's dead, when Storm's out of it because she's away from the team. I really enjoyed the intro. Ravi, what is your one-word impression?
Mine's gonna be nostalgia.
Oh, wow.
Because they used nostalgia, they being Disney, they used it to make us love this show. And then they also made it so that we, who are nostalgic for the show or whatever, we helped market the show and push it out there, right? Like, to the point where it's like, so I always find it fascinating. It's always like this weird mental exercise in my brain where the show comes out in 1992, the year Arjuna was born. And our dad is roughly the same age that we kind of are right now, in his early 30s. So our dad was in his early 30s when this show came out originally. Us now in our early 30s, and the continuation of the show happens. And it's just like this weird thing where it's like you've hit essentially 2 generations, right? Because our dad ended up watching the show because he watched it with us growing up. And like the fact that you've got 2 generations basically watching it and then using that nostalgia to then talk about it to other people, like a younger generation, or even folks that didn't necessarily watch the original. We're like this machine for Disney to like help push the show out. So it really hit on all the nostalgia, and it annoys me that like it works so well that like we help push the show out, which is just fine because the show is a really good show. So.
Do you have a fear, and you too, Christian, do either of you have a fear now that X-Men 97 has been so well received and done so well that Disney and Marvel is going to be like, oh, with X-Men 97 being so successful, we should bring back Spider-Man, the animated show. We should bring back X-Men Evolution, the 2000s X-Men show that was like on Fox. Like just bring all of these old nostalgia plays back because it's been so successful for them.
I don't think
either of you have a fear that's going to happen?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to bring back like the other X-Men shows like X-Men Evolution per se. I think they'll be smart and kind of hit upon like the Spider-Mans. Like I'm excited more so now for like the Comic-Con this year and the D23 this year. Because, like, I would have to imagine you don't drop fucking Peter Parker and Mary Jane, right, in this show in that way unless there's, like, something else in the works. Like, it just doesn't feel like... And especially all these other cameos, too. Like, it's not just... You don't just drop it. So I think there is more to come for sure. And, again, if Spider-Man, the anime show, continues, I think that would be amazing. That'd be great.
I think... If it's going to be the same quality that we got with X-Men 97, I have no issue with it because it's better than any of the live action stuff out right now. That's for damn sure. So, it would be interesting. I mean, unfortunately, Disney is a big company, and if they see dollar signs, they're going to push that button over and over and over and over again until it's not profitable anymore. So you worry about basically what's happened on the live action side, but they've overdone it, right? And they've saturated their own market, so to say. So you worry about that. But if they get the right creatives in, like they did with X-Men 97, like I don't know what that process is for who they brought in to work on that show, but if they keep that level of creative storytelling, and that's what it was about the show. Like obviously the production's great, the animation's great, the voice acting for the most part was great. So you expect that, right? You expect that from a big company like Disney. The part that's hard to nail is the creative storytelling. And whatever they did for X-Men 97, they need to do that, and it's whatever people they brought in to build out that world or continue that world is what they need to. That's the button they need to keep hitting. Don't worry about the money. Hit that creative storytelling button over and over and over again.
Unfortunately, Krishna, I don't know if you're aware of this, but they actually fired the showrunner of the show, Bo DeMeo.
I did hear about this. Yes,
who ran the show, who came up with a lot of the stories, was the real creative output for this. Not that he was the only individual that did this, but he was kind of the leader. And I think a lot of people are worried that the show is going to suffer a quality dip without him kind of being the guy that's in charge and helping run the ship and run the show. There's been a big push by a lot of vocal fans who want him to kind of come back or be involved in future Marvel projects. And I'm jumping around a little bit, but I am curious, with the success of X-Men 97, obviously, Christian, you talked about it is about the creatives that you bring in and who's kind of running this stuff. Does it give you any optimism about the live action MCU X-Men stuff that is coming? We are obviously getting Deadpool and Wolverine in July, which is going to be our first foray a little bit into mutants within the MCU. But is there any hope that some of the success can kind of translate over to the live action side?
No. there is no hope. There is no hope. And listen, this is the reason why. It's like the first time you do something, and if you do it well and it's done right, it's like capturing magic in a bottle. And the live action already had that moment. Everything that built up to Endgame, they had that moment. Now all they're doing is chasing that high. All they're trying to do now is build toward the same sort of public interest that they got leading into that movie. So I think it would be really hard to do that. The live action stuff, the world is too big. It's too unwieldy. There are too many characters and maybe chefs in the kitchen, so to speak, right? And each movie feels like it needs to accomplish about 18 things. At least with the animated stuff, I don't know why. It just, especially with like a Saturday morning cartoon-esque kind of a thing, by nature, it has to be self-contained. Because the people watching it, it's like, that's the expectation. The expectation is I want to sit down for 23 minutes. I want to watch a good story. It doesn't need to connect. That's like the nature of a Saturday morning cartoon. If you get away from that, it breaks the whole formula for a Saturday morning cartoon. The live action stuff, honestly, the only way to fix that is probably take like a 10-year break and then come back and almost start over. And I don't mean reboot. I mean like pick up whatever is interesting, different characters or whatever. Maybe, I don't know, but I have no hope for the live action.
Chris, are you aware? So you probably, I don't know if you saw the news in the last like 24 hours or so. So this week currently is what they call upfronts out in New York, where networks are pitching to advertisers for money, and they're showing new shows, etc., and all that stuff. During this whole thing, Disney announced, or specifically Marvel announced, that they're splitting Marvel Studios into kind of 3 divisions. So Marvel Studios will still maintain the movies. Marvel Animation will be this type of stuff with the animated shows and the what ifs and all that. And then there's also now Marvel Television, which is the things that will go on network television and streaming. Now, this is me just being cynical and just being me. But the way I looked at that was they are basically saying, we understand that you're fatigued. But what we're going to do is if we have 3 different studios coming with 3 different forms of content, we can still overload you with crap.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, on one hand, it almost, you know what it feels like? It's like people like me who are so fatigued with Marvel Studios and their content. I was like, oh, okay, well then you're fatigued. That's fine. We understand. Here's Marvel Animation. Here's what you crave. shorter stories that you don't have to invest so much into, or Marvel Television. So it's smart from a business standpoint. I totally understand it, and like I said, if X-Men 97 is like the new standard that they're going to try and hit, I mean, I would be all in for Marvel Animation for the, over Marvel Studios.
I mean, I'm not sure we released the video,
attention.
but you made your bold statement, I believe, in 2023 that you will not be participating in the viewing of any Marvel films going forward, which still does include Deadpool and Wolverine. So
yeah, that one's tough. That one is tough.
That's a toughie because, like, are you gonna just sit on the sidelines and watch the podcast and that's it?
I mean, the nice thing is I don't think that video is out yet, so
it's not published yet.
I don't know what you're talking about. To be honest, I don't know what you're referring to. There's no evidence of this. I will say this: Wolverine and Deadpool is was it 20th Century Fox?
Yes.
Holdover. So Marvel didn't ruin it yet.
Well, I mean, they did produce this one. This one was fully produced under the House of Mouse.
No, I get that
movie.
I get that, but it's like they're taking a pre-existing formula, and we'll see. It looks good. It looks great. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
All right. We'll see.
Well, we do have to finish our. We do have to finish our one-word impressions, so I'm going to bring it back to X-Men 97, and I'm going to go with soap as my one word. Soap as in soap opera, because I want to talk about the pacing of this show and how it had a kind of soap opera pace to it in a lot of ways by really quickly going through a lot of huge comic book arcs and stories within the X-Men universe. It was really like a neck break, like speed and pace to some of these stories, right? Where I think if you're a fan of the comics, these are months and months of issues that are being done in 20 minutes. Madeline Pryor being like a big one early in the show where, Jean has a doppelganger and that is all done and wrapped up in an episode and a half. The attack on Genosha, so many of these different stories and arcs were done very quickly. And I'm curious to hear what you guys think. I kind of liked it. I liked how quickly they moved the pace of the show. I think they did slow down at parts where they needed to. It's something that I think about when we're in 2024. We're in the age of streaming where shows are 10, 13 episodes instead of 22 episodes. And I do think, and I wonder, what would this season have been like if it was 22 episodes? What would this show have been if it had been kind of the September through May, let's say the Saturday morning cartoon that went for 22 weeks? Would the show have been as successful because there would have been more filler episodes? Because, I mean, I think with respect to Jubilee, I do think we can say like that Jubilee half episode was a little bit of a filler episode, but really outside of that, I don't know how many more episodes and sections you can really point to as quote unquote filler for this show. Like everything had big purpose, had big stakes, things changed dramatically for the team and the show and the universe. And I feel like people fall on two sides here. Some people really enjoyed it and liked the briskness of it. Some people were like, I wish there was more impact and that we could sit with some of these things that happened more and more. What did you guys think, Ravi? I'd love to hear your thoughts on pacing, as you're a big pace guy. You're all about pace.
Yes, I'm a huge Pacers fan. They're doing really well this season. No,
They're still in it.
I know, which is surprising. I know we don't talk sports ever, but that is surprising. Anyway. Go Celtics and Nuggets. Just because that'd be an interesting finale. I think as a 22, they did 22 episodes, I think, like you said right off the top, like Jean Grey's clone, instead of that being an episode, that would be like a 4 or 5 part, arc, right? 4 or 5 episodes, and like that's what the original series did. It was like a lot of it is arcs, 3 to 5 episodes with those like random one-off, Wolverine go shopping at the mall episode, like in the between, or whatnot. So like, I think from a perspective of like making the show like move nice and quickly, 10 episodes definitely works. If you go for that 22 episode season or whatever, you run into things like I don't know, the final season of the Clone Wars, the sister arc, whereas like, oh my god, could this have been shorter? Please, just an episode would have been fine. So I think it's just a balancing act, right? Like, if you have good stories, expand upon them. If they're dog shit and really just filler, make them a half season episode. That's fine. But if this thing was 22, I think it would have been. I don't think it would have done as well. I think because it was quick, it's more impactful because it's like so much is happening so quickly, and it does feel like whiplash. But again, it's impactful. It's impactful whiplashing.
Oh my. Okay. So okay, I'll leave that comment there. Krishna, what do you think? Did you like the pace of the show, or do you wish it had slowed down at parts, or do you wish it would have been even faster? Do you feel like the Jubilee episode really slowed things down?
Oh yeah, I want this thing wrapped up in 45. Let's go. I got time to kill. I don't have time to kill. No. Honestly, I love the pace because honestly, outside of that half episode, everything was really tied to this like main central story, right? And
Right.
or the situation going on. And that being said, I enjoyed it so much. I wish there was more to watch. So, but I don't know if it means like if more to watch means more of that the Jubilee video game stuff. Then no, I don't want that. You know what I'm saying? Like then it was perfect. But if so yeah, I think Ravi nailed it with the balancing act. And that's the thing too, right? Like when you have a story, most stories are gonna fall within that like 8 to 15 big plot points, right? So if you chart that for what they have here, we have 10 episodes. It's perfect, right? Like if you add more big points, you're going to dilute your story. If you add filler, you're going to dilute your story. So even if I personally want more episodes because I just enjoyed the show so much, I know more episodes would weaken the show. So I love the pace. It was great. It's funny too because if this was made for kids, I would say it needs to be longer. It should be 22. You need those fillers because and it needs to be week to week, right? Because kids need to suffer like we did. They need to.
Wait,
No,
are you saying this is not a children's show?
No, this was not a children's show. I mean, no, there was so much blood and like that was like Wolverine was like mutilated, like when Magneto's crushing him magnetically. So yeah, no, the pace was great. I loved it, and for us busy adults, with so much content to consume and podcasts to make, 10 episodes is about all we can probably handle in our busy schedules.
Okay, there we go. So we talked a lot about our expectations for the series. We've obviously done our one-word impression and talked a little bit about the show itself. But I want to get into the finale because I think the finale crystallizes a lot of the overarching kind of story arcs. And I want to start with, I think, what is the most impactful storyline, not necessarily in the finale, but the show itself. It is, and I think this is maybe I'm wrong, but to me is the best part of X-Men, is the ideologies of Charles Xavier versus Magneto. And I think this show really did an amazing job of showing that, Magneto has a really good point. And it's hard. You come away from the show. I mean, I think outside of maybe some of the Asteroid M stuff that he does in 9 and 10, outside of that, I think I think you'd be hard pressed to not agree with a lot of what he is kind of saying and doing. And he really did try to walk the path of Charles Xavier. On the flip side, I think this show really showed Charles Xavier to be kind of a dick, right? Like
kind of a child.
A child with like living in an unrealistic world. And I would, if I'm one of the X-Men, if I'm Cyclops, if I'm any of them, I'd have a real tough time following Charles Xavier like forward. I would be like, thanks, but no thanks. I'm good.
Do you know what why you feel that way, Juna?
Because I'm an adult.
Because we're living in 2024.
Yeah.
Back in the 90s, and I hate to say it, obviously our age also is going to color how we watch this. But a lot of people will say that we're living in the most, what do you call it?
Depressing time?
Not depressing time, no. Most pessimistic time. Sure. The most, like, the ideologies are the same from the 90s, but back in the 90s, we were kids as well, obviously. But the world was also in a very different place. Charles's idealism and optimism made sense back then. In today's world, this is just current events, and the world we're living in now, Magneto's ideas make more sense. And I think that is, and you nailed it. This is not even a conscious thought until, and when I say Magneto's ideas make more sense, what I mean by that is we don't have the luxury of Charles's idealism. It is childish and almost fairy tale and not possible, at least in the current climate, right? And yeah, it wasn't a conscious thought until Arjuna said it, but yeah, that's probably why the show was so good. Because
I'm very happy that you clarified what you meant.
Yeah, no, Magneto's right.
Magneto wants to destroy all of humanity, right?
Yeah, no.
Okay,
yeah, not that part. Not that part.
I will say this though, on the Magneto front, as we're clearly pro Magneto, his best line in the entire show in episode 10, he's like, "Old friend, there are two words."
Episode 9.
Episode 9. He's like, "Old friend, there are two words I've been wanting to tell you for a long time." And I thought it was gonna be "fuck off," but it was "shut up."
It pretty much was. That's the kid version of "fuck off."
Shut up. Amazing.
I will say they did. I mean, Magneto also evolved, I think, from where he was in the original animated show, because he was a little bit cartoony in some of his, like, I want to destroy humanity, and even his ideology is not to really destroy humanity. It's just to leave them alone and let them die naturally, right? Like, he turned off electricity to save mutants. It wasn't necessarily to kill humans. It was to save mutants from these sentinels. And the side effect is, yeah, humans will die. But he's like, you know what? Well, his ideology is like, you're not going to do anything for me, so why would I do anything for you, right? You guys have told us that we're mutants and we're this and that, and you want to be left alone. I'm leaving you alone. I turned it off. I saved my people. You guys figure it out yourselves. And I think that's a nice evolution to have, especially with a compelling antagonist, where you can actually relate to a lot of what the antagonist is doing. And I just think they did an amazing job with that. What did you guys think in the finale? The scenes that we had with Charles and Eric in the kind of mind meld that they're in with the water coming in.
The astral plane.
The astral plane, right. That they had, and where that kind of netted out with their relationship, and as as we look ahead even into season 2 of where they're going to be. What did you think of that, Ravi? We'll start with you. I feel like you're very pro Charles Xavier right now.
Well, I think it's, first of all, I'll say this: it was super cartoony. That's the one part that, if I had one major complaint about the show trying to be more modern, more updated, kind of a little bit more sophisticated, is specifically the astral plane and them having their conversation. That is very X-Men and Charles Xavier. He did that all the time in the original series. What felt very cartoony and goofy to me is how quickly Xavier forgave Magneto again for like causing massive, like what he did to Wolverine. That's like, that's pretty bad. That is not like a normal thing to do. The fact that
Wolverine did like puncture his lung.
Sure, but like for Wolverine, that's like the only way to stop this man from destroying everything. And yes, and it goes though back to the idea of like 2 wrongs don't make a right, or an eye for an eye and the world goes blind. It's just very cartoony and goofy, like how quickly Xavier was like, yeah, it's okay you did all this. You have pain and suffering, and that's fine. So it's okay. We're good. We're buddies again. And
But
isn't
that Xavier's fatal flaw? He is
that
so
is the
forgiving
biggest
of
flaw.
everybody,
But it's also, again, though, it's like,
including
again,
humans.
it just felt very cartoony and very like, yes, this is a kid's show again. Like
Well,
that's the only part that I was like, okay, this is taking me a little bit out of it.
Well, to Arjuna's point, it's not that as a kid show it's cartoony. It's because Charles Xavier is still a child. He hasn't grown up. He has this like childlike optimism in the world, and and that's great. That's wonderful. But it's not useful. In fact, it causes more harm than good. And this show did a great with this. Yeah, this show is a new show.
It's like Charles is playing a video game where he's like, I can do every single side quest. I can grab every single character to join my party. I can make everyone good. Like that is Charles's worldview, where he's like, I can check every single box, and it's just not realistic. He's like, I can redeem everyone. I can redeem Bastion. I can redeem the humans. It's like, you gotta slow down. Like at some point, you gotta draw a line. You gotta figure out what you're gonna do, because if you try to bring everyone along, you're all gonna drown, right? It's like it's the old saying: if you can't save yourself, you can't save anybody.
Yeah.
And I think Charles is. I'm really fascinated to see the arc they're gonna take with Xavier as the show continues to go on, because in the comics, right? Obviously, X-Men '97 draws from a lot of the different comic arcs in the '90s. There's a lot of comics where Xavier kind of continues to break bad and do like bad things. So I am curious to see if that happens and if that continues to happen, and where we kind of see these characters go. We're gonna get into the time jumps and stuff in a little bit here, but I do want to go through a few of the other characters. Let's talk about Bastion. Right, he's the big bad of the season. He Sahara pointed this out to me. He has some crazy one-liners that are just like actually insane in terms of just there's one with Charles Xavier where he talks about like the crippling future, and I'm like, wow, that is just a low blow when the guy can't walk. Like, okay, wow.
I didn't even make that connection. Amazing.
How did you feel like he served as kind of the big villain overall? And do you think he is now done, or do you think there is potentially more with this character going forward in the show? Krishna, we'll start with you.
I thought he was fine. To be honest, he was probably one of the weaker elements of the show, and that's not like a knock against him or anything like that. He was simply, his character was just to serve a purpose, right? And serve that purpose he did. I think he works as like a one-season villain. Like, I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense to keep him around. There's only so many characters that you can redeem and change and explore. And he did feel like a one-trick pony, a one-note sort of a villain. It was cool. It was cool. Like his backstory, like being influenced from the future, Sentinels, whatever. That was very cool. And if maybe they had dived more into that, like either like actual communications with the future or whatever that looks like, that might have made him more compelling and maybe more of than a one-season villain. But from what we've got, I think he works well as a one-season villain. I think it makes sense if he's just dead. I liked the moment at the end where Cyclops is kind of looking around as the X-Men are about to gear up, and he's like, "No," and this, and he's definitely taken on his mentors, some of his qualities.
Disappointed by it,
but for some reason, I'm okay with that in Cyclops.
Interesting.
And him being like, "No," especially because he's like a father and whatever. He's like, "No, if I can redeem you." And I don't know. I liked that moment as childish and weirdly optimistic as it was.
I was kind of hoping they were going the opposite way with Cyclops. So there's an arc in the early 2000s where Cyclops deviates from Charles Xavier and he founds the X-Force. And the X-Force is like the X-Men, but they basically kill everybody. And he becomes so extreme that he leads Magneto. Magneto joins the X-Force, but he succeeds leadership to Cyclops because Cyclops is more extreme in terms of his ideologies and stuff. And it really did feel like with Cyclops' arc that they were going that way, with losing Madeline Pryor, with the interview stuff that was happening in episode 5. It seemed like he was becoming more radicalized and more extreme. So I see what they did. Like, I think this is a good jumping off point even to like the Cyclops, Jean, and Nathan discussion, because that was his big arc with Jean and Madeline Pryor having the son Cable, Nathan in there as well. Ravi, I'm curious, did that all work for you? That arc that they had with Cyclops? Cyclops has, I think it's fascinating. The live action movies really damaged Cyclops' popularity because, with respect to James Marsden, his character is really sidelined for like Wolverine, and he kind of looks like a bitch in those movies a lot of the time.
Damn.
And his popularity has kind of waned over the years. So do we think this maybe repaired some of his popularity? Also, feel free to jump in on any Bastion stuff. I didn't know if you had.
No, I think with the Cyclops stuff, I mean, the X-Men the anime show has always been Cyclops centric. Like, he is kind of, you see majority of everything through his eyes, and I think there's a reason the first episode starts with him jumping in to save our new character whose name I can't remember.
Sunspot.
Sunspot, thank you. Like, there's a reason like it starts with, because he is the leader of the X-Men, so it's centralized around him. Most of the terrible things that happen are to him, because he is again the leader of the X-Men. Like, the entire Phoenix arc in the original series, like, he loses, Jean Grey, and then everything that happens in this with Madeline and Nathan. I think what's interesting with the Nathan stuff is, like, it's revealed in X-Men 97 that Nathan, what's Nathan's X-Men name again? It's
Cable.
Cable. It's it's revealed that Cable is Nathan, right? And for some reason, like, I don't know, maybe I read something back in the 90s, but like, I had always known that like Cable was Jean and Cyclops' son. It was just kind of weird that like in this series it's like, oh, now you're doing the dad thing. It's like, Cable, you've been around like a bunch. Like, you fought with the X-Men a bunch before. So that part was a little like, oh, I guess they never really sat down and figured out timelines and things. So I think it works out. It also helps set up a few, future stories, which obviously we got with the, end scenes of episode 10, where we see a young Nathan in the future. So
yeah, I will say, seeing Cyclops crack a little bit, especially in that first third with the losing Nathan and Madeline, and then that interview, it cracks the armor. I could totally see the X-Force being like a season 3 kind of a deal. Like, maybe like as fast as this season was, there are a few long-term nuggets in there, and I think Cyclops cracking is one of them. I think that would be really cool, actually, to see. Storytelling wise, not.
Are we sure that hasn't been done already in the original? Because remember, a lot of like stories have been, like Days of Future Past is a good one, where that arc has been done in the original series. In fact, I think one of the show's writers has said, make sure you watch that arc before you watch the last 3 episodes of this season 1 of X-Men 97. So
interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Good story.
So speaking of Cyclops, his contemporary, his counterpart is Wolverine. And I think there's been a lot of interesting discussion around Wolverine with this show, right? As we talked about with the 2000s and the movies kind of damaging Cyclops' popularity. On the flip side, it really, like, the live action movies really focused on Wolverine. They were kind of the Wolverine movies, right? Wolverine has kind of become the de facto most popular X-Men because of those. There were a few interviews where they talked about intentionally almost sidelining Wolverine to make sure that the rest of the X-Men could kind of grow. Not that Wolverine didn't get anything to do in this season, but he was kind of sidelined to a lot of like pretty funny quips. He had a little bit of the arc with Jean and as she kind of came back in and everything. And then obviously losing all the adamantium at the end of episode 9. But he was kind of sidelined. He was certainly sidelined in episode 10, right? He's just unconscious the entirety of the finale. We actually don't even know where he ends up when when the rest of the X-Men are in the future or the past. We don't see him in either timeline, so we don't even know where he is. He could be in the present still. We don't know. He could be dead. I don't think he's actually is dead. That'd be wild. But what did we think of the portrayal of Wolverine in the finale, in the show itself, and kind of looking ahead? What do we want to see from this character? Do we feel like they sidelined him too much, or do we think that was actually the right choice to give some of the other X-Men and the other characters some ability to shine through and introduce some of the other storylines that they wanted to and kind of needed to throughout the show? Ravi, we'll start with you, as you always wanted to be Wolverine growing up.
That is not true. I always wanted to be Gambit growing up. Way to not remember the past. I think with Wolverine, it makes sense. Again, they don't Wolverine in live action. Yeah, that makes sense. Deadpool and Wolverine coming out. The character has time to shine there. There's no reason to make 2024 the year of Wolverine. So I'm glad that they kind of kept him to the side doing his own thing. We know the thing with Wolverine is unless you're like diving into a season around like Wolverine, the thing is like we've already done that. Like we've already seen this like bad and disturbing past that he has and the terrible things that he's done and seen and etc. So it's like, why continue exploring that? And especially where he is like a side character. He's not a main X-Men in terms of like leadership and stuff like that. Like there is Wolverine in the X-Men, the animated show that came out like the mid to early 2000s or whatever, where he is the leader of the X-Men. And that was a fascinating show because it's this person who's a lone wolf, like becoming a leader and having to like jump around and get these people to like listen to him, even though he himself doesn't want this leadership role and stuff. So unless you were going to do that, I think how they set him up was great. I think it works. It makes sense. We just don't need it to be like Wolverine year, if you will.
Just to go off of that as well, the fact that we don't see him and Ravi pointed out or Morph in the after the time jump, right? Where our X-Men are pulled into different times, it sort of lends itself that he's going to get probably his own arc in the next season, right? We're probably going to have like, if him and Morph are together, we'll see them doing their own thing, which means he'll get more time naturally that way. But yeah, you guys hit on the head. Wolverine has been the face of X-Men since the 2000s when X-Men came out, the first movie, with Hugh Jackman. So it was a smart. I think it was a huge Jackman. Yes, I think it was a very smart choice on their part to put him to the side, focus on these other very interesting, equally interesting characters in the X-Men. I think that was a really good, smart choice.
Yeah, for sure. It's exciting to see, where the future of this show will go. Real quick before we get into the time jumps that we see at the end, just want to go through the cameos. I know we talked about it a little bit earlier with Spider-Man and Mary Jane reveal, but what were some of your other favorites that we kind of saw throughout this episode and even throughout the show, right? There's the Rogue and Captain America interaction that we have, I think, in episode 6 or 7. There's a few others as well, but what were some of the standouts to you? For me, I love seeing Daredevil. Daredevil is a character, we talked about Spider-Man, the animated show, a lot. He's a character that showed up a lot in that show, so I thought it was kind of cool to see him. But, whoever wants to go, what were some of your favorites?
Easy. Are you going to cut me off, Krishna?
Go ahead.
I'm going to list them all right now. Dr. Doom, Baron Zemo, basically anybody evil. That was great.
I'm gonna say the character of Morph was a walking cameo. He turned into at least half of the Marvel universe, like Mr. Fantastic, the Hulk, a bunch of others. I'm like, oh, so many. I can't think of a single a third one. But yeah, Morph is great because he's an interesting character because he is a Sinister. I believe he was a Mr. Sinister villain first, so it's cool to see him in the X-Men. He has a very unique power, which allows him to turn into any other character and has that powers, which is intriguing. So yeah, he was the cameo. He was just a walking cameo.
I believe Morph's pronouns are they them.
Yes.
Oh, okay, good to know.
I like the Doctor Strange one. I thought that was kind of cool. I also found it fascinating that Iron Man and Captain America were right there in the White House protecting the president. I think that says a lot about the Avengers and their role within the X-Men 97 universe, and I do kind of hope that
they're useless.
Well, I hope that's explored more, because there's another famous comic book storyline called X-Men versus the Avengers, and I do hope that we maybe potentially see some of that in season 2 or season 3 or a future season of 97. I think that would be really interesting.
Spider-Man's the pivotal part of that, because he is an Avenger, but I think he spends time as sort of because of the mutant. Remember when his DNA mutates and he turns into like the big spider? So he's also part mutant after he mutates. So he's also sort of a de facto X-Men as well. So
right,
and we saw Spider-Man at least 2 or 3 times in this season, just like quick little images. So
right,
you might be onto something. That might be a season 4 after X-Force.
Season 4. I mean, Bo DeMeo, again, the former showrunner, said he had a 5-season plan for the show. Now, will Disney adhere to that, or will that change? Probably, I would imagine. But that is good to know in terms of the road mapping of how they mapped out at least this first season. That this is like part 1 of 5.
Do we know why he was fired?
There is a lot of rumors out there.
There's nothing official.
There's nothing,
all that's official is
concrete.
Disney or Marvel and him parted ways. That's it.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and he probably signed like an NDA with that, so I doubt we'll hear anything official from. Well, certainly Disney will never say why, and I don't think he would say anything in the immediate future either because of that NDA. Real quick, before we get to bold predictions, I want to go through where we leave the show, right? We're in 3 different timelines. We're in the past, we're in the present, and we're in the future, right? The past is where the bulk of our main characters are: Charles, Magneto, Storm, Beast, Nightcrawler, and Rogue are all in the past, 3,000 years in ancient Egypt, and they run into our old friend, Apocalypse, before he is Apocalypse. He says his ancient name, which I will not say because I do not want to butcher it. We're
Oscar
in the
Isaac.
present, Oscar Isaac, you are all my children.
Oscar Isaac is Moon Knight.
That's true.
Oh shit.
Then we also have the present with Forge. Forge is kind of keeping tabs on who's around. He has a little board of different X-Men. If you pause it, there's a lot of different cameos you can kind of see of who the X-Men kind of are and who's around in this timeline. Then our old friend Bishop walks in. He's like, we're not friends yet because I'm also a time traveler, just like Cable. Presumably, maybe Cable is still around too, armless Cable, as well in the present. And then Jubilee and Sunspot are also in the present as they flew away from the ship at the end as well. And then we have the future with our pals Cyclops and Jean, and they run into a young Nathan. And an older woman character who goes by the Ascani. But if you're familiar with your comic book arcs, Ascani is Rachel Summers, who is Cyclops and Jean's daughter. So it's going to be a family reunion for them, probably, in the future. But which of these timelines are you most interested in? Are you kind of hoping that this next season is broken into all of these different times? Do you hope it comes back together quickly? Where are you both at with that? Ravi, we'll start with you. Are you excited for the past, present, future, all of the above, none of the above, or something else?
Definitely the past, I think, is going to be the more interesting one, just because it's ancient Egypt. There's also, we get to see the start of Apocalypse, which, for the most part, the X-Men know his past. They know that he's the first mutant, and I'm gonna guess that they are the reason Apocalypse is Apocalypse.
Yeah,
like I'm sure we will get something along the lines where Xavier's trying to teach
X-Men caused the mutants.
Basically, it could be something along the lines of that Xavier is like trying to sway Apocalypse a certain way. Magneto's trying to sway him a certain way, and then in doing so, they basically give Apocalypse his ideas.
They give rise to Apocalypse.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, and for very similar reasons, I'm more interested in the present timeline, specifically because of the after credit scene where we saw what we can assume and probably is present day Apocalypse picking up a Queen of Hearts, I think. Anyway, that's just a direct reference to Gambit, which I believe is a comic book arc where Apocalypse resurrects Gambit as one of his 4 horsemen. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I could be totally off base on this, but I believe that was what people were hyped about going into X-Men Rise of Apocalypse, the movie, way back when with Oscar Isaac. I think people were like, this is how they're going to introduce Gambit. He's going to have his 4 horsemen and Gambit. That's how we're going to get Gambit. Because that was one of the main knocks on the X-Men movies, was that there was no Gambit. Very super popular X-Men and supposed to be Rogue's love interest. They went with Magneto, which, by the way, I think directly influenced this show. That's why they had Magneto and Rogue do the retro. Oh yeah, we had a fling. That's directly taken from the movies. So I'm interested in that. I think that'd be pretty cool. And also,
Krishna, just to clarify real quick, it's not X-Men Rise of Apocalypse. It's just X-Men Apocalypse.
Oh,
Rise of Apocalypse is a video game.
Oh,
yes.
And then last thing as well, we sort of saw Charles Xavier maybe have a premonition about Gambit as a 4 horseman when he's on Alien. Gambit was turning into a skeleton. On the astral plane. Yeah, when he's teaching a bunch of genocidal alien maniacs.
I mean,
of optimism and idealism.
We didn't even get to talk about him, but Sinister gets stripped of his powers, right? In this, and I think he's still alive, right? I think he's just kind of like bumbling around. It's like a decrepit, and Sinister also in some arcs is one of Apocalypse's 4 horsemen. So I do wonder if he could also come back in that regard as well. I always think whenever they do an Apocalypse arc and they do who his 4 horsemen are, it's always fascinating to see like who the 4 horsemen are in general, because generally they're mutants that you know and whatnot. Like I think Wolverine. I mean, Wolverine has been part of every single team in Marvel. Like that's the joke in Marvel Comics. Like he joins the Avengers at one point. He joins the Fantastic Four at one point. You know, like he joins everybody for some reason. It's the lone wolf for some reason joins every single team possible. Why? Because he's popular, I guess. I don't know. But it would be like, is that how Wolverine gets his adamantium back, right? Does he become one of Apocalypse's horsemen? Potentially, you know. So that would be fascinating. I'll touch on the future as neither of you seem very interested in it. I will admit, I think it's probably the least exciting of the 3. But it will be interesting to kind of see the family dynamics with Scott and Jean and their kids and the time shenanigans of it all. And I also think going into the future will be kind of fascinating as well. All right. Let's get to bold predictions for season 2, right? We know season 2 is happening. It has been renewed. I believe the scripts are done. I believe the show is in production. What are our bold predictions? We could go anywhere with these. You know, we could go with the timing of it, the story of it. It could even just be for Marvel, like the animated universe and studio as a whole. Whatever you guys want to go with. Ravi, I know you are always very well prepared for these bold predictions. So we will start with Krishna.
So I'm going to go with a simple... I mean, it's going to be nothing story-driven, but I'm going to go with season 2 will not be as good as season 1. And I'm not just saying and I'm not even saying like us 3 collectively. I'm saying the general audience critics, it's going to be less because this first season was such a surprise and ended on such a high, and there are so many like good individual episodes. I think there is going to be a concern / worry that they need to somehow top that, and in doing so, they will topple themselves.
Oh shit!
Oh my!
Yeah.
Krishna, what about you? What is your bold prediction? Ravi's was a little cold, I will say. You know, a little safe. I wanted something that was great. So maybe you can redeem us here and bring the bold.
Before I offer my bold prediction, I have a question. When Magneto like superfies Wolverine, does he take like all the adamantium out of his body, or does he just sort of break him? Is that clear?
So
It is
I
not
believe,
really-
I believe
I mean,
this
the
is this
image-
is this is sorry. Go ahead, Ravi.
Yeah, the image is basically the adamantium is outside of his body, so he's pulled it out. And I think you were going to say this is also similar to what actually happens in a comic.
Yeah, the still itself from the end of episode 9 is very reminiscent of from a comic book arc where Magneto pulls the adamantium out of Wolverine's bones, and the way that arc goes is a little bit wild. So they find out that the adamantium was actually slowing Wolverine's mutation down, and he turns into like more of the animalistic Wolverine. Like his nose falls off. That's where he has his bone claws and everything. He kind of turns into this feral beast, and he turned into this feral beast for a few years in the comics before he finally got his adamantium back and became kind of human. But I don't think that's where they're going with the show, but it would be interesting if they were like, here is Wolverine, the Wolverine.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. Yeah. All right. So my bold prediction is going to be centered around Wolverine and what's going to happen with him. I think we had a brief cameo from Black Panther, King T'Challa himself, and Wolverine is going to get his adamantium replaced with vibranium. And if what you said is true, if they're going with, depending on the makeup of his bone structure, sort of leads itself to his character, I wonder what a vibranium-filled Wolverine, what kind of character that would be. And the fact that we don't see him or Morph, maybe they are in present-day Wakanda, or maybe Wakanda at a different time. And I think that would be kind of maybe Wakanda in the time of the first Black Panther. That'd be cool. He's the first White Wolf. Ooh, he is Bucky's ancestor. We're going anyway. Yeah, I think that would be kind of wild. I don't think it's been done. So I'm a big fan of properties following comic books, but I think it's even cooler when they can break off in a completely new direction. And I believe Vibranium Wolverine would be a completely new direction. And so that is my bold prediction.
All right, that was like a 5 out of 10 boldness,
Please,
a little
that
better
was
than
an 11.
Ravi's, but not as bold. I'm going to continue with my tradition that we started last week with Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes pod, and I'm going to say that it's going to be Top Gun meets X-Men. No, I'm just kidding. I will not be reheating that bold prediction. My bold prediction for season 2 of X-Men 97 is that the entire season will take place in the 3 different timelines, and when we come back to present, it will no longer be 1997, but it will be 2097, continuing the moniker of 97, but they will be in the far future, 100 years into it, and that will be the new present for season 3 of X-Men 97. That
Wow.
is
Do you think
my
we get
bold prediction.
Do you think we get Miguel Spider-Man? The Miguel Spider-Man. Oscar Isaac
Potentially,
also
yeah,
played by Oscar
2099.
Isaac.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is Oscar Isaac right now. He's been Apocalypse. He's been Moon Knight. He's been Miguel, Spider-Man 2099. Let's just have him appear in this
And
as
everything.
both Apocalypse and Miguel.
All his characters, all his
All of
children.
them. Yeah, let's get Moon Knight. in
Yeah,
there
because
as well.
he was Apocalypse, so Moon Knight and Miguel are his children.
Yeah, exactly.
Before we get to was it good? Before the age-old question, anything else, Krishna, Ravi, that you wanted to say about X-Men 97 before we say goodbye to season 1 and we wait, sometime between 6 months and 5 years for season 2?
Oh, we're getting season 2 in September.
Wait, what?
I mean, I'm just putting that out there right now. I mean, it's no like it's not a mystery or anything that Disney's very happy with the performance, and they have said they want them to come out quicker, so it will come out quicker.
Oh man, if that means
that'd
we're
be
dropping
sick.
quality, we don't want it.
That's why I
That's
gave
also
my
true.
bold prediction that Arjuna thinks is a bad one.
Well, it's not bold. It's just
It's not bold.
boring.
Yeah, it's kind of it's like, it's a normal.
You know what?
Was that a fart?
That's what I think of your thoughts on my bold prediction.
I have no closing thoughts on X-Men 97, except that I am worried for the future iterations of the show. If they are being forced to change creative heads, but we will see. I will channel a little bit of Charles Xavier and maintain a cautious optimism.
My other bold prediction was Bo DeMeo gets rehired as the showrunner for X-Men 97. Because
Well, we don't know why he was fired, so it's tough.
it's true,
Yeah,
but
he
like
could be a giant
it's not
doo-doo
unprecedented for Disney. They did fire James Gunn, and then they did rehire him.
That's true. That is a good
so
point.
I do feel like that there is a path forward, and if the show is a big pillar for them, and they feel like the success is kind of tied into the showrunner, they might decide, hey, we're going to bring him back. So, all right, let's start with the age-old question. Krishna, you can start it off. Go ahead.
Okay. Arjuna, was X-Men 97 good?
Yes, it was good. I'm even going to go as far to say that it will be my favorite show of 2024. Better than The Bear, Season 3. Better than House of the Dragon, Season 2. Better than Rings of Power, Season 2.
You haven't seen Fallout.
Better than Fallout. Better than Shogun. Better than The Penguin Show. Better than Dune Prophecy. Better than Agatha All Along.
Wait, Dune
yeah.
Prophecy? Is that a show? Oh my god.
They
Christian,
released
get
a
on the
trailer for it
internet.
yesterday.
Ravi, I'm scared of the internet.
Stop just looking at sports and look at pop culture. It's way more interesting.
I thought you were going to say, stop looking at sports, look at porn. It froze. Oh, are we back? Did you guys hear what I said?
Oh, you're back. Nope.
No, we did not.
I want to reset just for this. I thought you were going to say, stop looking at sports, look at porn instead of pop culture.
We can't figure
Okay, like a normal person.
It was funny because I said it and then you guys were frozen. I was like, oh man, that joke didn't land. But yeah, it was to bring it all back. X-Men 97
You're
Season
frozen
1 was very good. I am cautiously optimistic that maybe Season 2 will be, in the same realm as good. I am worried that it will fall off like we've talked about, but hopeful for the future. Ravi, was X-Men 97 Season 1 good?
Yes, it was good. I'd go so far as to say it's my favorite show of 2024. Better than The Bear Season 3. Oh, does this sound familiar? No, I'm not going to say it's probably the best show because the year's not done. What a silly thing to say.
It's bold. I'm being bold today.
Okay, clearly. I mean, at least you're not saying so-and-so is going to die. But yes.
Gambit will die again.
No, it was definitely a very, very good show. I will say this, which is more logical. It's my favorite animated show of 2024 so far. Definitely better than like season 2 of Invincible is what we're on currently, right? Or is it 3? I don't even remember. Season 2. So it's like I liked it more than that. So definitely a really good show.
Though we do
People
have
should
some
go
other
watch it.
animated shows coming out. There's the Cape Crusader Batman show coming out in August. That's getting some rave reviews. My Adventures with Superman Season 2 is coming out right now. So there are some like animated heavyweights out there potentially.
Yeah, but meh. Krishna, what was X-Men 97? A show that proves that nostalgia is a marketing tool. Good.
Yes, it was very good. And color me a follower of nostalgia. They are pushing that button hard, and it's working. And but you know what? If this is the quality, if this is the new benchmark, then good things are guaranteed. And so Charles Xavier was right. We should maintain our optimism. in the future of animated television.
You are all my children. All right, I think that's going to do it for us here on Was It Good? You can follow us on YouTube at youtube.com/Was It Good. You can follow us on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts at What's It Good. You can follow us on the socials, on TikTok and Instagram at Was It Good Pod. We will be back next Saturday to discuss Knuckles, the Paramount Plus show around the movies. I'm sure we all have lots of thoughts there. I know I certainly do have some thoughts and feelings about it. Until then, until next time, we are Was It Good? This is the podcast. Let us know if you liked it or not. And if you didn't, fuck off. No, just kidding.